Hello chums, and welcome to Setups for Simpletons. I've created an entire series dedicated to explaining Gran Turismo 7's quirky and sometimes unforgiving tuning system, but sometimes it's nice to just copy someone else's homework and be done with it. So in this series I will take one car at a time, show a complete setup, and a lap of the Nürburgring for good measure. Disclaimer, if you use my setup it does not mean you're a simpleton. Let's begin! In my previous video, I had a request for a 700 performance point setup for a Nissan Skyline R34 without the engine swap, and I figured, why not? For most of my 700 performance point tunes, I simply take a fully upgraded car and then reel it back with ballast, ECU restrictions, and removing upgrades. However, that usually results in less power, so I've built this from the ground up specifically for a 700 performance point race. For the visuals, I've got the wide body fitted, and aftermarket wheels one size up from standard. Increasing the size can make the car slightly more agile, potentially at the expense of stability. Decreasing the size can make the car more forgiving over curbs. The car has a front splitter for front downforce, a rear diffuser for extra downforce at the front and rear, and a custom rear wing. The Type A or B rear wings don't provide as much rear downforce. I created this endless livery a few years ago on my other username. Yes, it really is called Barbaric Truffle. You can find the livery by searching for Super Touring. One of the more important aspects of setting this car up is the choice of upgrades. The upgrades installed are as follows: weight reduction stage 1 and 2, bore up, power restrictor and ballast, fully customizable ECU, semi-racing silencer, high RPM turbo, customizable LSD, customizable manual transmission, polished ports, racing intercooler, racing air filter, racing exhaust manifold, racing brakes and pads, fully customizable suspension, torque vectoring center differential, and to cap it off, racing hard tyres along with the 2 sets of rain tyres. You'll notice I've made a point not to use any parts from the Ultimate tab, so this entire setup is accessible to players below level 50. Since most people will be using this for the half-hour race at De La Sarthe, this setup is focused mainly on straight-line speed and overall stability in case it rains. The suspension and LSD settings are very similar to what I would run if the car were fully upgraded. Where it differs is the downforce, which is maxed out at the rear and comparatively low at the front. This will cause general understeer, but it reduces the performance point rating enough to allow for much more power, so it's almost always faster over the course of a lap. I've added a few kilos of ballast weight to the rear axle to get the rating down to 700 performance points and hopefully balance out the tyre wear slightly. The gear ratios have been adjusted to allow the car to reach its top speed on the Mulsanne straight. While the R34 is set up for De La Sarthe, that won't stop me padding out the video to 8 minutes by taking it on a lap of the Nürburgring. While the downforce settings encourage a tendency towards understeer, it's easier to manage this car than you might expect. For obvious reasons, the V8 swap from the Group C car will be much better at the same performance point rating, but not everyone is level 50 or can afford to spend a million credits on the engine. Either way, this car feels pretty much like it's on rails with very little understeer, oversteer or instability of any kind. When it comes to building a car for a particular performance point limit, there's a few things that can give the car an edge. The aforementioned downforce settings are a good start, but things like the customizable LSD will often reduce the performance point rating as well, despite offering a performance benefit. You'll also notice the upgrades I've fitted are all items that don't increase the engine's redline. This typically allows you to run more power at a given performance point rating when compared to using upgrades that increase the redline but maybe don't add as much torque. In the end, I managed a 635, which places it pretty much side by side with a pile of other 700-ish performance point cars. The difference is this one is much easier to drive and is using racing hard tyres instead of racing soft. The 1970 Skyline with the Group 3 engine may reel some of it back with fuel economy, however. So, that was my 700 performance point setup for the R34 Skyline. I hope it helped. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, subscribe and kick me in the bell so that you get notified of my future uploads. Take care of yourself, and ta-ra.